Hey everybody, and welcome to NFL Nexus. Today we're diving deep into something that trips up even the most die-hard NFL fans, the coded language of the general manager. Because let's be honest, what these front office guys say in public, well, it's almost never the whole story. It really is a game within the game, and once you learn the rules, I promise you'll never listen to another press conference the same way again.
So that's the big question, right? You see your team's GM step up to the podium, he's showering a player with praise, talking about how they're a core guy and crucial to the team, and then boom, a few weeks later, that same player is cut or traded. It is so confusing, and honestly, it's frustrating. It can make you feel like you've been lied to. But what if I told you there's a pattern, a playbook they're all using? Well, today we're going to decode that playbook. We're going to give you the key to unlock what's really going on.
All right, so let's set the scene. Our journey starts at the NFL Combine Media Day. And forget the 40-yard dashes and the bench press for a minute. The real drama is happening at these podiums. It is a high-stakes media circus where every single GM and head coach gets put under a microscope. I mean, just picture it. Dozens of cameras, bright lights, reporters all shouting questions at once. They're getting hammered with questions, all while trying to protect their draft strategy, their free agency plans, and what they really think about their own players. It's a total pressure cooker, and it is the perfect place to see this strategic communication in action.
And this whole strategic song and dance, it actually has a name. We call it GM speak. And trust me, it's an art form. It's this really delicate dance of using praise and deflection and intentionally vague words to control the story that gets out to the public. So what's the goal? Well, it's to say all the right things to keep the fans and the media happy, while leaving yourself all the wiggle room you need to make the tough, and yeah, sometimes ruthless business decisions later on. To really get it, we're going to break down two textbook examples from one of the most respected GMs in the entire league.
Okay, so to really dig into this, we're going to focus on one guy in particular. Indianapolis Colts general manager Chris Ballard. Now, what's interesting is that Ballard has this reputation for being a straight shooter, which actually makes him the perfect case study. If even he has to use GM speak, it just shows you how deeply ingrained this is in the NFL culture. We're going to dissect his recent comments about two really key players, and I promise you, by the end of this, the gap between what he said and what the team's salary cap demands is going to be crystal clear.
All right, let's jump into our first case study, and it's a big one. The Colts' star wide receiver, Michael Pittman Jr. This guy has been an absolute cornerstone of their offense. He's a huge fan favorite. The kind of tough, reliable player you just assume is going to be a Colt for life. He's the guy making the tough catches over the middle, a real leader. But behind the scenes, things are getting very, very complicated.
So at the Combine, Ballard gets asked about Pittman's future, and this is his response. He says, "We love Michael." He calls him a pro, and then the big one, he's a big part of what we're doing here. Now, if you're a Colts fan, you hear this and you just breathe a massive sigh of relief, right? This is grade A, top shelf praise. It sounds like an absolute lock, a firm commitment that Pittman is part of their core. But then, right after heaping on all that praise, the conversation took a very, very weird turn.
Yeah, you heard that right. Right after all that glowing praise, Ballard pivots and starts talking about Michael Pittman being a pilot. And look, it's a cool story. Pittman and his brother actually started a flight school called Blitz Aviation, which is awesome, but you got to stop and think about the strategy here. A reporter asks you about a player's multi-million-dollar contract, a guy who's central to the future of your franchise, and your answer is to talk about his hobby? It's a complete and total intentional misdirection. It's like a verbal magic trick. Look at this shiny object over here. So why? Why the bizarre deflection about flying lessons? This, my friends, is a classic flashing red light sign of GM speak. That abrupt change of topic is a huge tell. It's a signal that Ballard wants the media and the fans looking over here at this fun little fact so they don't look over there at the real underlying issue. And that issue, it has nothing to do with Pittman's talent, his work ethic, or his skills in a cockpit. The real issue, as it so often is in the NFL, comes down to one thing.
This, $29 million. That right there is Michael Pittman Jr.'s scheduled salary cap hit for the 2026 season. And this single number completely reframes everything Chris Ballard just said. The praise was nice, the pilot story was a fun little distraction, but this number? This is the cold, hard reality. This is the unspoken reason for all that evasiveness. It's the massive elephant in the room that he was trying to hide with a story about airplanes.
So you're probably wondering, where the heck does that giant number even come from? Well, it's the final year of a big 3-year, $70 million extension he signed. That $29 million cap hit is made up of a massive $22 million base salary plus a $2 million roster bonus that kicks in. Now you gotta remember, Every team has a finite amount of money to spend. That's the salary cap. And paying that much for one wide receiver, even a really good one, is a huge, huge burden. That's money that could go to a starting cornerback and a solid offensive lineman. It crushes your ability to build depth. This is what we call a cap casualty situation. And it's the real reason his future in Indy's so uncertain.
And this is where the whole thing gets really tough for the Colts front office. You look at his 2025 stats, and on the surface, they're great. He led the team in catches, in targets, and even set a career high in touchdowns. He's clearly a productive, valuable player. But you have to dig deeper, just like a GM does. His receiving yards? They were actually his lowest since his rookie year. And maybe even more important, his teammate Alec Pierce actually emerged as the team's #1 receiver in terms of yardage, breaking 1,000 yards. So now the question for the front office becomes a cold, hard business one. Are we willing to pay nearly $30 million for a player who, by some key metrics, might actually be our #2 receiver? That's the brutal calculation that forces a GM to start speaking in code.
Okay, let's move to our second case study, because I want you to see how this pattern repeats itself. It's remarkably similar, even though the context here is completely different. Now we're talking about quarterback Anthony Richardson, a player the Colts didn't just sign in free agency, but a guy they invested the 4th overall pick in the entire draft to get. The stakes here are even higher.
So let's quickly recap Richardson's journey, because man, it's been a roller coaster. He was the 4th overall pick in 2023, hailed as the absolute savior of the franchise. The hopes and dreams of the entire city were basically placed on this kid's shoulders, but it has not gone to plan. He ended up losing the starting job to a surprisingly resurgent Daniel Jones, and then, in 2025, he suffered a really serious orbital bone fracture that ended his season. The good news is he's now been medically cleared, but while he was on the sidelines recovering, the entire quarterback room kind of changed around him. So with all that as context, Ballard was asked point-blank if he sees a future for Richardson in Indianapolis, and his answer is just a masterclass in saying nothing. Listen closely to this. He starts with, "I see a future, yeah," but he immediately follows it up with this massive hedge. Kind of like with any player, you never know what's going to happen and things change. And then he finishes with, "But yeah, we like Anthony." We like him? I mean, come on, that is not the ringing endorsement you give a former 4th overall pick. "We like him" is what you say about a backup offensive lineman or a special teams gunner, not your supposed quarterback of the future.
That vagueness is it's deafening, right? If you truly believed in Anthony Richardson and his future with the team, the answer would be totally different. It would be something like, "We are incredibly excited to get Anthony back on the field. His talent is undeniable, and we absolutely believe he has a bright future here." But instead, what do we get? We get hesitation. We get non-committal language. And just like with Michael Pittman Jr., it is classic GM speak that's pointing us away from the real story. The real issue isn't his recovery from injury. It's about a huge financial decision that's looming on the horizon.
And here it is. Here's the problem in its purest form. $23.5 million. That's the projected cost of Anthony Richardson's 5th-year option. Because he was a first-round pick, the Colts have the option to keep him for a 5th year, but it comes at this massive preset price that's based on his draft slot. And this number is the entire story. It's the reason for all the hesitation, for all the vague, "we like him" language. So let's just lay this out as simply as possible, because this slide really puts the Colts' impossible choice into perspective. The situation is simple. Right now, Anthony Richardson is a backup quarterback. The cost to keep that backup quarterback for just one season would be a fully guaranteed $23.5 million. I mean, just think about that. Can you name a single team in the NFL that can afford to pay their backup QB that kind of money? It's more than a lot of starting quarterbacks make. It's just an impossible business proposition, no matter how much you might like the guy as a person. And if there was any doubt left, the rest of the QB room really seals his fate. Daniel Jones is the clear starter, and all the reports say the team is all in on giving him a long-term extension. And then behind him, you've got Riley Leonard, a younger QB who showed a lot of promise, and most importantly, is on a dirt-cheap rookie contract. So you see the absolute nightmare scenario unfolding. If the Colts pick up Richardson's option, they could be paying him $23.5 million to be the most expensive third-string quarterback in the history of the NFL. It is simply not going to happen. Okay, so we've looked at Pittman's situation, we've looked at Richardson's. What's the big takeaway here? How does all of this change the way that we as fans should be consuming information about our favorite teams? Well, it all comes down to understanding that there are really two conversations happening at all times. There's the public one, full of praise and positivity, and then there's the private, financial one, which is all about the numbers. So here's the pattern laid bare for you. With both Michael Pittman Jr. and Anthony Richardson, the public comments from Chris Ballard were overwhelmingly positive. He praised their character, he praised their work ethic, he said all the right things you'd want to hear as a fan.
But in both cases, the cold, hard numbers baked into their contracts told a completely different and far more uncertain story. The public praise is just a smokescreen. The real decisions are being forced by the salary cap.
And this brings us to our final, decoded definition of GM speak. It's not just about talking without saying anything. No, it is a very specific strategy. It's using public praise as a shield to hide from difficult and often unpopular financial realities. It allows a GM to maintain good relationships with players and agents, it keeps a player's trade value high, and it avoids upsetting the fan base. All while the numbers on a spreadsheet are the things that are really steering the ship. The true message is always found in the contract, not in the press conference quote.
And you know, the best part is you can become a decoder too. You don't need to be an insider. Here's your playbook. First, when you hear a GM praising a player, especially when it feels a little too over the top, listen but be skeptical. Step 2, immediately open up your phone and pull up a site like Over the Cap or Spot Track and find that player's contract details. Third, don't just look at this year's salary. Look ahead for those big, scary salary cap hits in the coming years. Fourth, ask yourself a really honest question. Is their performance on the field actually worth that massive price tag? And finally, step 5, look at the big picture. Does the team have other big contracts they have to worry about? Are they in a rebuilding phase? Put all those pieces together and I guarantee you'll have a much, much clearer picture of what's really going on.
And you know, all of this decoding and financial analysis, it kind of leaves us with a much bigger, almost philosophical question. As fans, we root for these players, right? We buy their jerseys, we think of them as part of our team's family. But when you really pull back the curtain and see how these brutally pragmatic, numbers-driven decisions are made, you have to ask yourself, in the cold, hard billion-dollar business that is the modern NFL, does that idea of loyalty even stand a chance against the brutal reality of the bottom line?
So what do you guys think about that question? Is loyalty pretty much dead in the modern NFL? Is this just smart business, or do you think the game is losing something essential when the numbers seem to dictate everything? I'm genuinely curious to know your take, so please drop a comment below. I promise I read every single one of them.
And hey, if you enjoyed this breakdown and you want more deep dives into the business of football just like this one, do us a huge favor and hit that subscribe button for NFL Nexus, and please give this video a like. It really is a huge help for the channel, and it guarantees you won't miss our next explainer.
And hey, if you're looking for another way to support the channel and maybe share your love of the game with someone, check out our coloring books. They're honestly perfect for fans of all ages, for your kids, grandkids, or hey, even for you. You can find the link right in the description or just scan the QR code on your screen. Your support really does mean the world to us.
Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time, right here on NFL Nexus.